Frame vs. Dominic 2. Electric Boogaloo.
Hello, hello, hello. How's everybody all doing today? Yes, Dominic did indeed make more than one Wicked video.
The real Commonwealth.
Thank you for the super chat, and thank you for the super chat earlier, Liam. Crim versus Dominic 2, Electric Boogaloo. Yeah, he's really capitalizing on the Wicked hype, and like I can't be mad at that because I'm also like making a bunch of Wicked videos this year. My review of the book will probably, knock on wood, come out Friday. So cream jump scare. Boo. Alright. So, okay, I've muted my phone. I've taken my pills. I got a snack. I got a drink. Let's pull up the video and start. Okay. This one? No. This one. Here we freaking go. And I'll just stop the music. What is a Wicked really based on? Crim Tent. Yes. Get ready for a full day of Crim Tent. Speaking of Crim Tent, if you didn't know, I made a video released yesterday. It was supposed to release on Friday, but it was a day late. What are you gonna do? About X-Men and the mutants, and I think the plan is for a friend of the channel to be reacting to that live on stream. So that'll be happening afterwards. Somebody will be reacting to my video. So if all goes to plan, I will be redirecting that. So is my mic a little peaky today? It's a little loud. Test. The Electric Boogaloo thing, it's based off of a movie. Boogaloo. It's like something to do with disco. Yeah, Break Into Electric Boogaloo was the name of a... Oh.
On the right side, we have the whitest man to have ever white in the whole history of white people. And on the left side, we have the creature.
I simply work here. I simply work here, Gwen. People are actually, like, I think Dom's fans found the first video, and they are big mad at me. They're so mad. They're like, oh, you say this in the video, but, source, and it's like, he literally just said what I said that he said. Anyway. Yeah, I stole the idea from Goddammit Malcolm. Also, like the stream if you haven't liked it. I see that there are 50 people in chat right now, so make sure... There's 50 people in chat, so make sure that you like the video. Alright, shall we get started?
Hello my beautiful watchers, and welcome to Lost in Adaptation, the review show about comparing film adaptations to the books they're based on. Or in this case, the book to the other book that it's based on. This is the first of 3 episodes, all dedicated to the different generations of Wicked, from the 1900s children's fantasy to the dark political allegory, then to musical theatre, and now to 2-part feature film form. So...
Alright. Dom. Can I call you Dom? The premise of this video, on its face is incorrect. Wicked is not an adaptation of The Wizard of Oz. It's a transformative work. That's like...
Since you are a demon, can we talk to Mephisto to give back Peter Parker marriage to Mary Jane?
Listen, Adrian, I'm sorry. I'm an imp. I'm really low level. Like, I'm basically like a garbage man. I'm I don't think that guy even knows who I am. Also, Raccoon, make sure you have redirects turned on, and also send me your... Are you doing are you doing like a stream on the Discord, or is it going to be on YouTube? I wasn't trying to break your eardrum, I'm sorry. Why is my mic so sensitive today? Mac? Okay, so Mac in chat, Book of Mac, is actually going to be coming on to the channel, is going to be coming on later to talk about this. Give me a second. You're gonna... Hello, test. Oh my god, it's so sensitive. How's this? Is this better? Is this okay? Okay, Raccoon, make sure that you have redirects turned on your channel. And also send me a link to your channel so I can subscribe to you. So that I can redirect. Anyway. But yes, it's a transformative work. Not an adaptation. The Wizard of Oz was also extremely political for the time. Extremely political. It was a political book based on the politics of 1900 when it was released. And Wicked, which was made almost 100 years later, was based on the politics of its time. So yeah, they're going to be different. Imagine.
Yeah, L. Frank Baum's The Wonderful Wizard of Oz to Gregory Maguire's Wicked. What separates them besides the 95 years that passed between their births? BT Dubs, I am aware that I'm somewhat stretching the definition of the word adaptation here in this first video.
Yeah, you're not just stretching it, you're just lying. You're lying. It's like saying Dante's Inferno is an adaptation of the fucking Bible, you idiot. Sorry, I'm being rude already. I'm sorry, Dom. I shouldn't be calling you names. But I feel like you are being deliberately obtuse because you don't like this book. And it's making me mad because you are extremely biased. You did not enjoy this book, and so you are judging it unfairly because it didn't meet your expectations.
This is a non-canonical fanfiction prequel in which only the fifth and final section of the book overlaps with the plot of the source material and implies that the innocence of the original series was either due to the unreliable naivete of the 12-year-old narrator or the result of a very successful propaganda campaign launched by the evilest bastard you could possibly conceive in literature. In this...
Again, the wizard was a bad guy in the original series. He was a fraud. He had upended the ruling class, which was a woman, of Oz. Like, took advantage of the fact that Princess Ozma had disappeared and became ruler. He was doing a colonization and using fraud to make it seem like he was a good guy when he was a fake and a liar the whole time. But anyway.
Context, changing things is obviously a feature, not a bug. But updating a cast of characters, world, and extended lore into dark political allegory while still trying to tie into the events of a century-old children's book is not a simple matter, and I think it's worth discussing which parts Maguire carried over and which he chose to quietly ignore. Because no matter how much darker the vibe is, no one can deny this is meant to be set in the world of L. Frank Baum's book series. Or is it? Because, as I'm sure you're aware, there's another generation in this family tree that's supposedly not in the line of succession, but is by far the most famous of the entire...
Dom. Can I call you Dom? Again, this is very well known. It was based on both the movie and the book. There are details in Wicked that are only in the book, The Wizard of Oz. But it also takes great inspiration from the movie. It does both. It is using a popular cultural touchstone of American literature to talk about the current American politics. Oh boy, Krim, I need you to brace for the next bit. What is he about to say?
group, and I've clocked enough suspiciously Wizard of Filmy things in Gregory Maguire's novel to throw doubt on its true origin.
¿El mago de Oz? ¿Qué haces aquí? He venido a conocer a mi hijo. ¿De qué habla, papá? No le escuches, hijo mío. Wicked, a pesar de lo que te haya dicho.
He thinks he's so clever. Like, he thinks he's so clever, but, like, everybody knows that the fucking movie... Oh my god, okay. Can I turn up Dom's volume? He's on full blast. Oh. Let me see what I can do, chat. Add filter, gain.
Dicho Gregory Maguire, yo soy tu padre auténtico.
So, I intend to shamelessly digress before even getting started on the book.
Doug Walker as Joe.
Yeah. This is... I said this in the comments afterwards, and I talked about this with a couple other people. Like, this is just The Wall by Doug Walker all over again. You dense motherfucker.
Comparison and ask, what is Wicked really based on? Well, legally speaking, they have to be based on the Oz books by L. Frank Baum because they are in the public domain, meaning enough time has passed since the author's death for any copyright protections to expire, thus allowing other authors to legally make a profit from the IP, and the iconic 1939 film starring Julie Garland is not, and won't be until 2035, assuming they don't change the rules again. So this should be a pretty open and shut case, and yet, well, let's take a look at both sides of the argument. The strongest case for Wicked being based on the book is probably the geography and the people of the Land of Oz. The film doesn't really go into the way the country is divided in...
It's both, dude. Also, one of my... It's clearly both because the slippers, the slippers are silver in the books, right? But like the biggest hint that it's both is because in Wicked, the slippers they're iridescent, so they shift between silver, red, and blue. They're multiple colors. And they're made from rubies, well, not rubies, but they're made from glass from Quadling country, which has red minerals in it. So Quadlings in Wicked, like they have like a glass blowing technique where they use the minerals from the clay found in Quadling country, which is rich in rubies, to make colored glass. And Frex had a quadling lover, and he taught him how to blow glass. So Frex, who is Elphaba and Nessaros's father, makes slippers for Nessaros using this glass blowing technique, and like basically studs the slippers with beads of glass that have those minerals in it, and makes it in such a way that it's iridescent and shifts between silver to red to blue. That's the biggest hint that it's based on both. And one of my favorite little Easter eggs in Wicked is that there is a moment after the death of Amma Clutch, who was essentially Glinda's nanny slash the chaperone of Glinda and Elphaba. After she dies, they go to a bar, and everybody finds out that Elphaba used to sing to her father's to her father's flock. I can't remember what the proper term is, like the people that like listen to him preach. And so they kind of convince her to sing, and the lyrics are never written down because there doesn't have the legal right to do so, but it's heavily implied that the song that Elphaba sings in that moment, towards the end of her time at Shiz, is Somewhere Over the Rainbow, which is famously from the movie. Like, it is both, my dude. You didn't uncover this big mystery. Like, he has said in interviews that he took inspiration from both, but he's only using what he's legally allowed to that's in the public domain. Fun fact, the final book of Baum's original 14 wasn't in the public domain until the year after Wicked came out. Interesting. Did he make a point about Return to Oz because that actually used the ruby slippers? No, he will be, I think he'll be covering the later books later. I don't know if he's read the later books, but anyway.
To 4 parts, or identify any of the other races who live there besides the Munchkins. You see what are probably the Winkies towards the end, but they're not named, and the Quadlings and Gillikin feature not at all, and all of these things are major plot elements in Wicked. Then there's the plot events that only occurred in the book, like the waves of different animals the witch sent to kill Dorothy, who were slaughtered by her companions. The closest thing to this in the film was an interesting deleted scene that involved the gang getting weakened before the flying monkey attack by a jitterbug that forces them to dance to exhaustion. And if you want to be pedantic, you could make a case for it being a point in the book's favour that the talking animals are described as actually looking like animals and not dudes in rompers. So why am I still so convinced that this novel is actually based on the film? Well, I don't know. Maybe because the Wicked Witch of the West was not green in L. Frank Baum's book. J'accuse. I mean, look at this. The
I'm sorry to go silent. I'm sorry for the dead air. Oh my god. I hate... I hate men that think that they figured something else out and nobody else has noticed it before, when it's like, yeah, this is common knowledge. You're not clever. Everybody already knows this. It's... Yes. You got it, Dom. Good job. Good job, buddy. Good job. You figured it out. Yay. He's so smart, you guys. Everybody give Dom a cookie for being a smart boy. Yay. He's such a smart boy. Aw, he's so smart. Look at him.
collector's edition of the book is green. The entire
Yes, it's not just the collector's. Oh my god.
marketing palette is green, but her being green originated in the film that it's definitely not based on. It was introduced as a Technicolor flex. You know, they really wanted to get the most out of the new color film. Do you want to know how the Wicked Witch of the West was described in the book? She had only one eye, but it could see really far like a telescope. That is the entirety of her physical description. This is what she looked like in the official illustrated copy of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. The fact that the Wicked version of her isn't described as a 3-foot-tall clown pirate alone proves this isn't who Maguire was thinking of. She's also just such a minor character in the original book. She's only in 2 of 24 total chapters and never mentioned outside of them. She's only one obstacle of many, which included bear-tiger hybrids, a giant spider, and some territorial dudes whose necks extended at high speed so they could headbutt people really hard, and honestly, she wasn't particularly difficult to overcome compared to them. If the film hadn't decided to raise her up to the main antagonist of the story, it would have been utterly nonsensical to write a book recontextualizing her life. There's just not enough context to read. The black clothing, the pointy hat, the flying broomstick, and her much bigger role in the story were all introduced with the film version of the character, and while you could, and I'm sure Maguire would if taken to court, make the case that most of these attributes are sufficiently generic witch stuff to be fair game, people often forget that green skin was very rarely a staple of witchhood before 1939. Wicked's Wicked Witch's relationship to the flying monkeys is also suspiciously film-like. The book was extremely specific about these little dudes, their backstory, and their relationship to the witch. They were strong-willed, mischievous scamps who had pissed off the wrong sorceress with their pranks a few generations before the start of the book, and as punishment had been cursed to perform 3 tasks for anyone who owned a golden cap, which happened to have fallen into the possession of the Wicked Witch. It's ironic that Flying Monkey became synonymous with mindless henchmen, because in their original appearance, they really didn't like having to obey the witch and were very disrespectful to her. Anyway, none of this is in Wicked, which instead depicts them as a chimera-like hybrid species which was surgically created by Elphaba, only capable of basic language comprehension and entirely loyal to her. Sorry.
Hold on.
All this is a long-winded way of saying...
Yeah, this is how I know that he wasn't paying attention. There's only one flying monkey in Wicked. Only one. It's only Chistery. He's the only one. There are no other flying monkeys. There's only one. I'm the first person to wonder why everyone doesn't recognize Clark Kent is Superman when he takes off his glasses. I liked the original Frank L. Baum book, but yeah. Yeah, I'm beginning to remember why I stopped watching this guy's videos.
That this backstory contradicts the book, but not necessarily the film. The arguably second-ish most important character is also very clearly more film than Baum, because Glinda was the good witch of the South, not the North, and there was nothing to suggest that she was all cutesy and pink-themed. Quite the opposite. Glinda of the books was a stone-cold badass.
Dom, can I call you Dom? I don't think you were paying attention because Glinda doesn't wear pink in the books. Glinda only wears pink in the musical and the movie. Dom! She is a so-called... Glinda's a bitch in when we first okay, she's not a bitch. She's very Glinda's a very complicated character, but she isn't bubbly in the book. She later puts on the affectation of bubbly, like, socialite housewife much later in life. That personality only comes out in one scene. And that's when Fiyero meets up with Glinda, like, later in life. And he's like, wow, I don't remember Glinda being like that. because she wasn't. She was academically ambitious. She wanted to be seen as this smart, beautiful, desirable, like respected woman. She was passionate about architecture. And you know what color she's wearing in the first scene of the fucking book? She's wearing green and black. That's the first time that we ever see Glinda, and that's the color she's wearing. She wears green and black, and throughout the book, she wears mostly green. Because green is seen as a sophisticated color because of the Emerald City. But yes, she does get a bit of a magical lobotomy and gets her wings clipped. Yep. She acts shallow when we first meet her. I wouldn't say that she's actually shallow. She does understand the way of the world and politics, and she's basically she's very insecure until Dr. Dilliman dies. And her change her change after Dr. Dilliman dies isn't shallow like it is in the musical. It's profoundly affects her. She basically ditches all of her old friends and starts hanging out with Elphaba and Nessa Rose more. But anyway.
She commanded an all-female army from a throne of ruby. There was a reason that Glinda was the only person the Wicked Witches never messed with. She and her girls would fuck you up. And while the Glinda of Wicked is somewhat nuanced and has a decent character arc, she's still very clearly meant to be a young Billy Burke with her nice dresses and upbeat demeanor. She also ends up in the North, anyway. The original elderly Good Witch of the North being suspiciously absent from the book, and there is no mention of her girl boss squad. The one thing that Maguire could absolutely not get away with was the ruby slippers. Originally changed from silver shoes as another way to show off the new colour film technology, the shiny red testaments to inappropriate for long walks footwear became immediately iconic to the Wizard of Oz mythos, and because they were sufficiently original, they're one of the very few things that the film studio was able to copyright. Other movies like Return to Oz had to get their permission to use them, and it seems unlikely they would extend the same tolerance to a sex and drugs reimagining like Wicked. So, no ruby slippers, but you can tell Maguire really wanted them. Both times the silver shoes are described in detail, he makes a point of suggesting that they sparkle and invokes the colour of blood as a descriptor. This is like the only clearly defined boundary on the film's copyright, and he's dancing as close to it as he can get away with. And if all of that is not—
No, again, like, he does it many times. It's based on both, dude. Like, this isn't some fucking mystery you're uncovering.
Not enough evidence for you, then there's the little fact that Maguire just gave the entire game away when describing his inspiration for the book.
Are there any evil characters in children's books? And immediately, a vision of Margaret Hamilton arose up in front of me, saying, "I'll get you and your little dog." And I thought, Jesus, Mary and Joseph, I've just had a vision.
Bro is out there claiming it's based on Baum's novel while name-dropping the actress who played the Wicked Witch in the film and quoting lines that were entirely original to her. So while there is a case for the Land of Oz itself and the plot mostly being from the wonderful Wizard of Oz,
Cream, you got a detail wrong. There is more than one flying monkey. Remember, it took 4 years and multiple failures, and it mentioned the babies still aren't born with wings.
Are you sure? My bad. You know what, actually? My bad, Boggle. You are so correct. I'm just a little fool. My honest reaction. Okay. Back.
Oz, the protagonist, the main focus of the entire story, and one of her more iconic side characters, are 100% undeniably illegally from the film. But does this really matter?
No, it
Or at least
doesn't.
matter enough to justify the rant I just went on?
No.
Well, yeah,
No.
I actually think it does, because Wicked is, when you get right down to it, fan fiction. And to write good fan fiction, you have to be genuinely passionate about the IP you're writing about. And I just don't think Maguire was passionate about The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum. I think he was passionate about the popularity of The Wizard of
I don't know, guys. Do you think that Gregory Maguire is passionate about this character in this series? This comes out next month. These are some of his other books, by the way. Similar sort of he likes adapting old fairy tales and recontextualizing them. That's like his whole thing. But I wonder, do you think that it's popular? Do you think it's just that it's popular? Do you think that maybe he has a story to tell and he's very passionate about it? Yes, the graphic novel also comes out soon. He just says that Wicked might be illegal and just continues on so irresponsible. Buddy, listen. If Wicked was illegal, I'm sure in the past 30 years that we, I'm sure sometime in the past 30 years, like something would have happened, but it didn't. So calm down.
film and what that could do for his book sales, and I don't know, I think that shows in the quality of the book and how much effort was put into it as an adaptation. But
Dom, I'm going to actually kill you with a hammer.
Well,
I'm going to drop a house on you, is what's going to happen.
Now, sir, let's talk about the rest of the adaptation anyway.
I love how he just spent the past 10 minutes poisoning the well before he even gets to actual analysis. But let's go.
As I said, geographically there's definitely something there. 4 nations to the north, east, south and west, and the Emerald City about in the middle. Maguire does admittedly complicate the map somewhat, but I think it's within the bounds of making it look a bit more realistic and complex while still keeping to the vibe of the original. Plot-wise, well, as I mentioned in my last video, the first tie-in to Baum's canon is a Munchkin matron coming to the Witch of the East and trading livestock in exchange for a curse being put on a woodcutter's axe that would eventually lead him to accidentally hack himself to pieces bit by bit because she didn't want him to marry and part her from a useful servant. They even name-drop the future Tin Woodsman's real identity, Nick Chopper, which was only revealed in the sequel Oz novels. Yeah, he had a name that whole time. Dorothy just never asked him what it was, the little shit. Wicked also includes the demise of the Witch of the East via a barnhouse being dropped on her by a freak twister that travelled all the way from Kansas to Oz, and Glinda giving Dorothy, the house's inexplicably unharmed occupant, the late witch's cool shoes. Dorothy teams up with 3 people she meets along the yellow brick road, a living scarecrow, a now Tin Man, and a cowardly lion. And of course there's a very small but significant to Wicked moment where she's very briefly fed and sheltered by a rich munchkin called Boch. The Wizard of Oz, who successfully intimidates the party with a puppet show, sends her on an assassination mission to the west to kill the witch there, who sees their approach from afar and sends waves of wolves, crows, bees, and finally flying monkeys at them, who grab Dorothy and the cowardly lion and lob the other 2 off over the horizon somewhere. Though it is worth noting that in Wicked, the wolves were not actually intended as an attack, but a welcoming party, because the witch had optimistically convinced herself that the Scarecrow was her assumed dead lover in disguise coming back to her, and she only switched to more deadly animals after being disappointed that there was nothing inside him but straw. Also, the pack of dogs were led by a loyal old pupper that she'd had for years, making the woodsman killing spree of them rather tragic and upsetting. Anyways, also true to Baum's vision was Dorothy manslaughtering the witch with a bucket of water, and the wizard leaving Oz in his hot air balloon shortly afterwards. So it's not like the events of the first book are entirely absent, even if they're all crammed into the final few chapters of Wicked, but being present isn't the same thing as being the same thing. I'm aware that's one of those statements that sounds deep until you actually think about it and realize it's basically meaningless, but
Yeah, just kind of like this whole video. Dom, you are missing the fucking point. If you don't like this sort of thing, don't read it. This is a whole genre. Like, it is a genre popularized by fucking Dante. Paradise Lost, like Dante's Inferno. I'm being mean. For those of you who can't see it, I just left a comment. I'm leaving a comment. You know what else isn't a very good adaptation? Dante's Inferno, SMH. It feels like that guy didn't even read the Bible and wasn't passionate about it at all. What a dishonest guy. Dante is uneducated and not even a good Catholic. Also, he clearly just had the hots for Virgil and really wanted to write about him. Am I right, fellas? No, I wasn't muted. I was just angrily typing a comment.
Just trying to segue here. To quickly reiterate, as the premise of this book is to present a radically different point of view on a story and throw doubt on the reliability of the original, most of these changes should not be considered a failure of adaptation, but, you know, the whole point of the book. That said, some of Maguire's decisions regarding the source material still kind of ticked me off, but I'll swing back around to that. Obviously, the biggest general change has to be the dark realism introduced to the formerly child logic world of Oz and all of the economic issues, droughts, education systems, class divides, and whatnot that comes with that. But the most relevant to the plot of Wicked is Elphaba, despite becoming known as the Wicked Witch of the West, was not in fact wicked. She was just willing.
She did become wicked. That's the plot.
To challenge authority in a way that made her the focus of a smear campaign that was unfortunately so successful it's all anyone remembered about her after.
No. That's musical only. Even after she had gone fucking nuts, people were inviting her over for dinner. They were like, oh, yeah, it's just Elphaba. She's harmless. She's not going to hurt Dorothy. Like, nobody expected Elphaba to there was no smear campaign. Like, she was liked even after she had sequestered herself to Kiyama-ko. Like, nobody knew she attempted to kill Madame Morrible. She wanted that reputation. She went to Morrible's hospital. See what happened in the like the last section of Wicked after Elphaba has gone nuts is that she wants to kill Madame Morrible, goes to her hospice because she's old and dying, and when she gets there, Morrible is already dead. She just died of old age. And Elphaba is pissed because originally she was going to assassinate Morrible on the day that Fiyero died. So she just takes a big trophy and like smashes her head in. And then she leaves and goes to an old classmate of hers, Averick, and she's like, hey, Averick, I just want you to know that I killed Madame Morrible. And he's like, okay, do you want me to arrest you or are you going to stay for dinner? Because Averick's like, Elphaba, I know you. You're not a murderer. And she goes to Bach and she's like, hey, Bach, I killed Madame Morrible. And he's like, oh, do you want to hold my baby? Like, that's not what happened. That's just a musical thing. Like, Elphaba is not hated by anyone. She's just a crotchety old woman. Is he saying Oz was apolitical before Wicked? I think so.
Her death. She's not depicted as a hero as such, but as a nuanced character with an iron-hard sense of social justice, who, while generally unpleasant socially, is predominantly on the side of good,
So, here are all Elphaba's friends. Elphaba Throp, of course. Then there's Glinda, Elphaba's best friend, who would later be known as Glinda the Good. Bach, a friend of Elphaba and a farmer in his later life. Fiyero Tigalar, Elphaba's lover and the crown prince of the Arjikis, of the Vinkus. Nessa Rose Throp, Elphaba's younger sister. Averick Tenmeadows, a frenemy of Elphaba. Milla, a friend of Glinda and Bach's future wife. Shen Minkos, a friend of Glinda and a later teacher at St. Proud's later in life. Fanny, a friend of Glinda. Crope, a close friend of Bach and Tibbet, and an actor and arts auction house manager in his later life. Tibbet, a close friend of Bach and Crope. Also, Crope and Tibbet are boyfriends. And I believe, I can't remember which one it is, but I believe Tibbet gets a bit of a crush on Fiyero when they're all in school together, and Crope gets very jealous until Fiero's like, "I'm sorry, guys, I'm married. I was betrothed as a boy. I'm married." And then Crope and Tibbet make up a little bit. And then like a couple chapters later, Averick is just like draped over Fianni and Fiyero. Like he has his like legs in I think it's Fianni or maybe it's Shen. Anyway, he has his legs in one of their laps and like his arm around Fiyero, and they're just like pissed, drunk, and cuddling. It's so funny. And then and then like in that scene, they're like drunk and throwing like globs of cream at each other, and then like the bartender's like, "Get out of here." It's really funny. Anyway, the boys still weren't allowed access to Crage Hall, nor the girls the boys' schools, but the city center area of Shiz became an extension of the parlors and lecture halls in which they were allowed to mingle. On a midweek morning, they would meet by the canal with a bottle of wine, or in a cafe or a student watering hole, or they would walk about and discuss the fine points of Shiz architecture, or they would laugh about the excesses of their teachers. Bach and Averick, Elphaba and Nessarose, Glinda, and sometimes Fanny and Shen and Milla, and sometimes Crope and Tibbet. And Crope brought Fiyero along. It was a charmed circle. So it was a friend group. Elphaba had a lot of people that loved her and cared about her. Even as she became an old recluse, they're like, "Elphaba, it's so good to see you." Like, there was no smear campaign. Everything that happened with Elphaba was in the shadows and under the radar and hidden away. You did not pay attention. You can be left-wing or centrist and still spout that rhetoric. Yeah, there are such things as like left-wing grifters, and I don't know, this feel a bit grifty to me.
At least for the majority of the book. Towards the end, she's been slowly but surely...
Okay. Dom rides his posh accent. He's coasting on it. Also fucking button your shirt up, dude. Like, what the fuck? But he's just coasting on that. Can you imagine, like... Let's take a break and do a bit of an experiment. How do I look at a transcript? Can I look at a transcript of a video? Here we go. Show transcript. Where are we? 1334? I want to do an experiment. All right. Okay, hold on. Somebody sent me some fan art, you guys. We're replacing Goob. Ah! I'm fucking shitting and pissing. This is so funny. Thank you, Boy Done, for this image. Oh my god. Hold on. There we go. Fucking killing me. Oh, it's so good. Thank you, Boy Done. I'm gonna get my dear friend, if he's willing. Kroob. That's what I called the file too, was Kroob. uh. Oh, okay. Maybe not. Maybe not. The friend that I wanted to call on is a little bit busy. Okay. So I'll just do my voice, and I'll swing back to that, obviously. The biggest general change has to be the dark realism introduced to the formerly child logic world of Oz, and all of the economic issues, droughts, education systems, classifieds, and whatnot that comes with that. But the most relevant to the plot of Wicked is, despite becoming known as the Wicked Witch of the West, and not in fact wicked, she was just willing to challenge the authority in a way that made her the focus of a smear campaign that was unfortunately so successful it's all anyone remembers her about her death. She's not depicted as a hero as such, but as a nuanced character with an iron-hard sense of social justice who, while generally unpleasantly socially, is predominantly on the side of good, at least for the majority of the book. Like,
He arrived to Kroob what?
that's just how I feel. But, like, it doesn't sound as smart in my voice. It only sounds smart because of his accent.
Pushed into less moral behavior by a world that constantly treats her as if she's already evil just because she's an activist in a world that wishes to ignore its problems, and
nobody treats her like she's evil, dog. That's a tragedy happens to her, and Madame Morrible, it's not. She is a little bit. She's prickly, and people are like, oh wow, she's green, but people aren't like, ew, green, disgusting. It's like very much, oh, how odd, are you related to elves? Like, it's just like, I'm gonna bring up one of my favorite quotes. Wicked is a wonderful sort of examination of this idea. Hold on. If I could. I looked at this quote the other day for another reason. This is by the guy who made Mouse, and I'm realizing, look, suffering doesn't make you better, it just makes you suffer. That's from his Meta Mouse, a look inside the classic Mouse, which is a story about World War II, and mice are kind of used as a stand-in for Jewish people. And it's because his father, even while going through such an awful time being in a concentration camp, is still bitter old and racist towards like black people. Because it didn't make him a better person, it made him suffer. Suffering doesn't make you good. Just makes you suffer. It can often make you worse in a lot of ways.
Woman of colour. Yeah, the green thing is not a subtle metaphor. She's still undeniably the protagonist of the story though, as relative to her opposition, the wizard, she is an absolute saint. Speaking of her green skin, it's actually...
Okay, I'm gonna just go back a little bit. So, I also want to say that, like, while Elphaba is green, you know who gets more shit for their skin color? Fiyero. Fiyero gets treated worse for being brown than Elphaba does for being green. Elphaba is still upper class. Like, despite looking the way she looks, she's basically next in line to be the spiritual leader of Munchkinland. She's a tall Munchkinlander. That puts her in, quite high regards. So she's basically Oz royalty. And her green skin, while odd, doesn't separate her by race. Fiyero, on the other hand, so much racism is aimed at Fiyero. Averick, who I've mentioned before, and is also a very complicated character. He's very much the upper class kind of snobby, racist white boy. He's not cruel. He can be a little bit cruel. He's a very complicated character as well. And funnily enough, he's who Fiyero from the musical is based on. I think I've mentioned that before on stream. But the first time he sees Fiyero, he says he has shit-colored skin. Which is awful. What an awful thing to say about somebody who it seems to imply later in their friendship that he's kind of attracted to him. So, like, even though he finds Fiyero attractive, he still is like, why does who would want shit-colored skin? And then he, like, looks at Elphaba, he's like, oh yeah, I forgot. You probably are sensitive about skin color. Like, Elphaba's skin color just becomes such a non-issue to her friends. It's not because of her skin color, it's because she dresses shabby and she's very socially awkward. Like, the greenness is like an oddity and makes her stand out, but like most of her friends don't care. Nobody cares because it's Oz. It's a magical land anyway. I watched this video. I don't know everything about Wicked, but it seemed fine to me. Maybe that's just the way he frames things about the book. Oh yeah, the thing is, the reason that you think it's fine if you haven't read Wicked is that Dominic is just entirely dishonest about the book. Like, this is, like, he's just lying in some parts. Like, that's not a part of the book. Like he's just making things up. And what he's doing is and this is why I can't this is what makes me so mad about the musical. He's transplanting visuals and ideas that are musical only and projecting them onto the book when they're not there. Like, he was like, oh, Glinda wears pink and she's really bubbly. Bitch, no the fuck she isn't.
It's been a while since I've seen Meet the Robinsons. This is exactly what I remember in the backstory.
Yeah. Ironically enough, that's But the thing is that Elphaba isn't even really bitter towards her friends. Like, she goes and she hangs out with her friends later in life. Elphaba doesn't feel betrayed or upset by her friends from school. She is a little bit bitter, but it's more that, like, why don't you hate the wizard as much as I do? And they're like, we're just kind of trying to live our lives. Like, Elphaba doesn't hate her friends don't hate her. She goes back to see them even when she's on her descent into being wicked. Like, yeah. reading Elphaba's skin as a race metaphor feels like Twitter lib take 101. It makes her stand out. I think it's more of a queer metaphor than like a race metaphor, or just in general just a metaphor for otherness, like an otherness that's born into a family that is otherwise supposed to be very normal. Like, she did not have a normal upbringing despite her being upper class. She's clearly something is going on. Like, I don't know, I kind of see Elphaba as being on the spectrum. I think that's kind of like an obvious read of her. Yeah, I read it as autism. Me too. Me too. I think it's a very good metaphor, like, because it's like she's born and it's like, oh, something's different about my baby, and like she like chews on herself, and she's very, there's very clearly like something odd about her, like mentally. She seems to understand things that she shouldn't understand, but at the same time she doesn't really act the way she's supposed to. I think, yeah, I think like it being a metaphor for something like autism is much more apt, because there already is racism in Wicked, and this guy isn't touching on it at all. And the racism is separate from the animal politics, and is separate from how Elphaba is treated. But yes, Elphaba is loved by her friends. She loves her friends. They respect her. They love her. She respects and she loves them, even later in life. The only one she has a big falling out is Glinda. And Glinda, it's so complicated. Now I think he's gonna talk about the sexual assault against Mylena, which is Elphaba's mom. So like, trigger warning for that, and trigger warning again, because I'm going to be discussing some sexual assault that happens in the book too. I need people to understand that the reason that Glinda is the way she is later in life is essentially, yeah, she was magically lobotomized, so that whenever she tries to think a bad thought against the wizard and against Madame Morrible, she starts thinking about sex, and that's a magical spell that's been placed on her, and it's so monstrous. And I think it's supposed to evoke the whole hysteria thing, because Nessa Rose, Elphaba, and Glinda were asking too many questions. They were sticking their nose in. They were powerful women that weren't falling into line. So like women were thrown in insane asylums and stuff, right? For being like that, or it was thought that there was something sexually, like, you know, they thought there was something like sexually wrong with them. And considering that Nessa Rose never marries, and that Glinda is assumed and very much implied to be a lesbian, and Elphaba is bisexual and intersex, I would say that, like, yeah, I like it. I've decided that straight people aren't allowed to talk about Wicked, actually. It's a very queer book, and all of this is about queer politics. And obviously there's some intersectionality with like racial and gender politics, but like this book is so queer. And I'm not going to apologize for using the word queer, because I think, you know, that was sort of the vibe that was intended. And I know I've been told that Dom is pansexual. Okay. Or that he, you know, he leans towards straight, but he's a little pan, and like, okay, sure, whatever. But like, to not use a queer lens when analyzing this book, like, we're over halfway through. He didn't bring up any of the queerness in the first book. The only thing he made mention to was like, oh, I read the book and then I found out that Gregory Maguire is gay. I wonder who that's for. I don't know, man. I think that, like, the perspective of a gay Catholic man is very probably nuanced, and maybe we should like take that into consideration. And considering that Elphaba became a Mont, considering how like Maguire has spoken about how when he was a little boy, when he was a young Catholic boy, I think might have been an altar boy for a bit, that he thought nuns were so cool and mysterious, and to him they were like witches. Like, and he thought that was cool. Like, what a little gay boy thing to say.
Was Dominic Noble or CD to react to?
Oh, CD, 100%. There's something, like, I can understand where Dominic is coming from and what his reasoning is. I just think he's wrong, and I think he's being dishonest, and I think that he wasn't paying attention to Wicked, and this is all, like, a fucking grift. I'm sorry, I'm being, not a grift, but I think it's all, okay, I am admittedly being very harsh, and my opinions are colored by this being my favorite book for 20 years, and I've read it, like, 6 times. My most recent reading being just last month. The mental assault spell is horrible, and I think it's cool use of fantasy settings to elevate the cruelty in a way that feels realistic. In that, if a cruel person had access to this is what they would do. But yeah. But yes, he's definitely making this now because of the movie. And like, I can't knock that. I'm making my Wicked series, which is going to last all year, because of the movie. I might have talked about it eventually, because again, it's my favorite book, but it was really spurned by the movie, and I'm not stupid. I know if I make a bunch of Wicked videos, I'm going to get boosted in the algorithm, but like, I was inspired because I'm pissed that like people are shitting all over my favorite book. Yeah, Grift implies he's trying to sell you something better. Anyway.
Wizard, she is an absolute saint. Speaking of her green skin, it's and the wizard, she is an absolute saint. Speaking of her green skin, it's actually kind of ironic that it's definitely borrowed from the film, as in the context of the film, it would be kind of weird for people to be horrified by it. I mean, just look, in the film, everyone from her kingdom is green. Whatever species she was is just green-skinned. You don't...
Winkies are, like, brown in, again, like, they're brown in the book, of Wicked. And people are racist to them. They're thought of as savages. Like, it's very much, like, anti-brown, anti-black racism. We're not sure. I don't think there is a 1-to-1. It's very like Avatar in that way. But anyway.
Have to try to explain it with sexual assault drugs. The second most extreme character shift between the books is the before-mentioned wizard.
Okay. Sorry, I just want to read Boy Dunn's. Reading the books in a gay man's point of view really changes how you read it. In high school, I thought the book was made by a straight man, and my opinion was negative. Yeah, look, I'll be honest with you. The first time I read it, I was like, okay. And then I read Son of a Witch, and there's this scene where Lear, the Elphaba's son, just fucking grabs a handful of his friend's ass, his male friend's ass, and is like, he's basically thinking like, we could fuck right now. And I think the moment passes, and I don't think they end up having sex. I would have to reread the book. But I was like, hold on a minute. What? Lear is bi? And I was like, wait a minute. Because like when, like, you know, because the girls kiss and there's like this moment where like and then like Averick is very affectionate and kisses Bach, but like you think that it's like, oh, it's just boys being like, he's probably, you don't assume that what you're reading is like supposed to be gay. You assume that you're reading too much into it. So I was like, I'm probably reading too much into it. And then, like, just Lear grabbing Cherry Stone's ass. And I was like, wait a minute. So after I read Son of a Witch, I went back and I read Wicked again, like, right afterwards. And I'm like, oh my God, no, this is gay as hell. And, like, after I read it a second time, I was like, oh, okay. He's gay and Catholic. That makes so much sense.
I mean, geez, how can I fully get across what Maguire did to this character? I mean, no one would ever say that the wizard was a hero. He was, in Baum's words, a fraud and a humbug, and it's hard to overlook the whole sending a child on an assassination mission thing, but still.
And again, we're going to talk about why Maguire made frauds. And again, like the lens of like Maguire being let's go. Let's go to the wiki one. The reason that Maguire thought that the reason that Maguire thought that being a fraud was like one of the most evil things that you could ever be is because it's basically like the 8th circle of hell. That's basically like the second worst thing you can do, and the only worst thing is treachery. So, and then there's Bulgia, there's panders and seducers, there's flatterers, there's simonics, sorcerers, barators, hypocrites, thieves, counselors of fraud, sowers of discord, and falsifiers. And the wizard fits very much in here. So, like, more sower of discord perhaps more fits. Like in Wicked, it fits more in with, like, all of them. But again, so suddenly, imposters run rabid through the pits. Psyche sinks his teeth into the neck of an alchemist. Capacho drags him away like prey. So, like, counterfeiters, falsifiers of money, perjurers, like, and treachery that you possibly could be, according to, like, a lot of Catholic, like, ideas. Like, this is here's Dante and Virgil right here. They like, this is Virgil, this is Dante throwing himself, or maybe it's the other way around, but the whole throwing. But, like, this is what, like, Catholics think should happen to frauds. Sorry for the educational nudity. I love that painting, by the way. I love it so much. Ooh, William Adolphe Bourgeot. Oh, he's such a good painter. Anyway, but, like, that's why he's turned into such an evil guy, because from the lens of a Catholic, that's, like, one of the worst things you can do. Being a fraud is, like, as evil as you could possibly get without just betraying people. And because, you know, the wizard isn't from Oz, it's not treachery. But anyway, he's the worst of the worst by this standard of Catholics. Yes, again, above only traitors, which I would say Madame Morrible is a traitor, and probably suffers a fate worse than I guess not really. She dies of old age, but, like, she's even more evil than the wizard, really. Anyway.
I wouldn't say he was a fundamentally evil guy. Again, as Baum himself wrote, he was a good man but a very bad wizard. But the best way I can describe this...
No, that's how the wizard describes himself. And again, reading it, you need to read this. You need to understand who the author is before you make claims like this. Gregory Maguire is a very queer Catholic man. He was one of the first people to get married in Massachusetts after same-sex. Well, he was one of the first, like, Sorry, I'm going to try to put this a little bit more distinctly. he was one of the first people in Massachusetts to take advantage of same-sex marriage becoming legal. Like, he was very gay and very open about it at a time that wasn't an okay thing to do. Like, let me see, when did he come out? Because I remember, hold on a second. And he's in Massachusetts, so keep that in mind. 1997. Oh, and then they adopted. When did he come out? Hold on a second. Because, yeah. He met Newman in 1997, so this was after Wicked. I'm not sure when he came out, but considering he got married so quickly and considering... Hold on a second. – 2005. So it came out after the musical. Nice. Okay. Yeah. But there was still obvious. I think that the queerness in the original one was obvious. But he has a very private life in general. But we do know that he got married and his family was... Yeah. They were on Oprah. But anyway... I think reading Wicked without the lens that Maguire is gay and Catholic is, like, you need to understand the lens of where things are coming from before you fucking critique them, Dominic, and you're just ignoring all of that. You're ignoring the queer subtext. We are 14, almost 15 minutes into this, and you still haven't talked about the queer subtext. Not even the queer subtext, but, like, just the queerness, the queer themes of the book. You have not mentioned any of them, but let's go.
Guy in Wicked is... he's an interdimensional magic Hitler who also date rapes. Yeah, it's almost funny how not subtle Maguire was writing this guy. In this version of Oz, after arriving in his hot air balloon, the wizard had galvanized the citizens of the Emerald City into militarizing and annexed the 4 nations of the land so he could rule them with an iron fist and a private Gestapo of murderous thugs. He
are failing to mention that, like, there was already a problem with, like, colonization and, like, racism, and there was droughts in the bread bowl of Oz. Like, it was already, it was full of political rife, and the wizard came in and took advantage of a bad situation. That was what was going on. But anyway...
regularly kidnaps and tortures political opponents to death or catatonic compliance, and when a drought had started to cause mass suffering, he did what all dictators do and blamed a minority group for everyone's troubles, choosing the
drought was happening before the wizard got there. Like, it had been a problem for years. But anyway...
talking animals, slowly but surely restricting their rights as individuals until they were treated as essentially regular animals. BTW, regular non-sapient animals, also exist in this book. The difference between them is signified by capitalizing the A, which one assumes must have caused some confusion for the audiobook. Also, spoiler for the last plot twist of...
No, the way that the audiobook is pronounced, it's enunciated in a way that makes it very distinct, I think. Like, animals versus animals. Like, I think it was pretty distinct and obvious. But, like, also that difficulty, like, the fact that the words sound similar, like, that's also, like, that's part of it. Animals are animals. Like, it is enunciated, and, like, the guy who did the audiobook is English and has such a better, like, like, you know, has, like, a better way of speaking than my little nasally Nova Scotian voice. But
the book, but it turns out he's Elphaba's biological father. Before
Wow, I've never heard of this happening in adaptations of children's books. Don't look at the giant stacks of Alice adaptations that do the same thing behind me.
he was famous, he happened to be passing by her mother's house and just decided to drop in for a quick drugging and sexual assault. I don't know if Maguire felt he needed to have a bad guy so irredeemably terrible his occasionally morally grey protagonist would remain on the high ground, or if he just had a random hate boner for the wizard, but the only conceivable way one could character assassinate this fictional person worse than this would be to cast James Franco to portray him. Even his fraudulence, that the core principle of his character in the original book seems to be in question. While most of his tricks to impress visitors are book accurately fake and wicked, well, he travelled between dimensions and worlds on purpose chasing a spell book, so he's obviously a bit magic. The witch's habit of melting when unexpectedly hydrated is explained as an extreme case of acrogenic urticaria, which, considering how much more grounded Wicked is in science and whatnot, raises some questions about how on earth she's, alive in the first place. Not to suggest that Balm's original explanation made any more sense, as he claimed that she had been so wicked for so long, her body had completely dried up and left her flesh with the tensile strength of rice paper. Yes, in the wonderful land of Oz, how moist you are is a direct reflection of your goodness, implying that Glinda must have been very, very
I'm going to kill you.
very moist indeed. So very, very moist. Oh, okay, so
I gotta go get a drink. I'm gonna go get a fucking drink. I'm canceling cis men. Cis men are canceled. Sorry, guys. Don't talk to me ever again. I'll be right back. I need need to wash my face and get some good tequila. How fucking dare you? How dare you be like, I think he, like, getting all like, oh, but he, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, ew, disgusting, and then get fucking really weird about, like, the moistness of women's pussies.
Have you ever read the Hellbound WOZ books?
Yes, yes, I loved the Wicked. I read the whole series in high school, and I've revisited them a couple times as an adult. No, I loved the Bomb books when I was in high school. Oh, I'm gonna need so much tequila to get through the rest of this. I hate dudes that comment on the fucking moistness of women's pussies. Like, fuck off. And like, ooh, she must be, like, bleh. I'm calm. I'm light as a feather. It's this dark Ben Shapiro moment.
Are the creative decisions that stood out to me, not because of their significance or relevance to the plot, but just because they rubbed me personally the wrong way.
Oh,
and
poor Dom. He got
I should disclaimer
the wrong
that
way.
these complaints might come off as me projecting intent onto Maguire. I'm certainly not pretending their entire...
Ah, boy, here we go. More. He knows what he's doing. He's doing that thing where it's like, I think that maybe I might be projecting a little bit, but because I said that I might be projecting about it, you can't criticize me for it.
Objective. Right, to start with, elves and dwarfs occasionally feature in Wicked, never in a huge way, but in a few plot-relevant events. Neither race appears in the Oz books, within the land of Oz itself, or the surrounding lands on the other side of the Big Desert. Do you know why this annoyed me? There are so many sapient races in the extended Oz universe. Amongst dozens of others, you've got hammerheads, hoppers, horners, wheelers, whimsies, pinkies, winkies, mythkits, mistmaidens, mermaids, gnomes, scooters, skeezers, scutterfaces, dragons, demons, daughters of the rainbow, and I kid you not, a race called dicks, who are known for being quite nice. But instead of utilizing any of these many pre-existing options, Maguire instead crowbarred the two most generic fantasy races in modern literature into the world, and that just seems lazy and another...
It's because it doesn't matter. It's because they're not plot relevant, and, like, it literally doesn't matter.
Indicator that he just was not passionate about the IP that he was usurping for his writing. Another thing was the TikToks. Robot servants are a fairly common thing kicking around in the background of Wicked, and one is even used as the assassin that Marin Marble sent to kill Dr. Dillamond. The thing is though, in the original books, TikTok was the name of an individual, not a whole clockwork race, and importantly, he was clearly defined as being the only one of his kind because his creators mysteriously vanished shortly after his construction. I guess what really bothers me is that there's not even a throwaway line explaining how they ended up going into mass production after all, so to me it comes off less like an adaptation related creative choice and more just getting the details right.
It's because, like, Gregory Maguire is coming at this after the Industrial Revolution.
Pass the bottle, boss. He craved the funny Oblivion liquid.
Because, like, again, Baum wrote his book in the 1900s. Maguire made his book in 1995. He like it was released in the early 1900s. Maguire wrote his books 1995 and onward. So he has the hindsight of, like, yeah, if, like, robot servants were created, they would be mass produced. And no, it's not. I haven't gone back and read the earlier, not the earlier books, but the later books. But the funny thing is, like, at the end of Wicked, Grammatic, the servant of Morrible, is starting a TikTok liberation movement. But anyway, there's so much that could be said about the TikTok creations, and I think it's touched on more in the later books, and I don't want to comment on them too much right now, but it's like heavily implied that the liberation of animals does lead to the liberation of TikTok people as well, because that's how liberation movements work. One spurns another, spurns another, spurns another, spurns another. So animals getting liberated is good for everybody. And like the repression of animals is bad for everybody. Maguire is writing this with the hindsight of like what a mechanical race, what like a mechanical person, how that would be, after, much after, Asimov. Yes. Much after Asimov's books, right? Who did like a lot of, where's his bibliography? Here we go. Bibliography. 500 books. Jesus Christ. Yeah. 1954. Oh, nope. 1950 might have been his earliest. Yeah. He started writing in the 1950s. So Maguire has the benefit of writers like Asimov to build off of how, like, automated men and women, or whatever, automated people, how they would be treated by society. Asimov laid a lot of foundations in fiction. And also, again, like, both of these men were writing after the Industrial Revolution had kind of finished, if that makes sense. But anyway.
Asterisk, a realistic buoyant pathetic portrayal of a powerful man taking advantage of a woman. Asterisk, oui, that's unnecessary. Asterisk, unprompted roundabout joke at a woman's expense. Asterisk, just another day on YouTube.
Exactly. Like, he's like bitching and moaning and whining about like there being like an empathetic but like largely respectful depiction of like sex and like pain and like sexual abuse and assault, and like that being treated in a fairly realistic and like understanding way. But then he just fucking makes a joke about a woman's pussy for no fucking reason. There's not enough
misunderstanding the source material. Even if it's not, Maguire didn't have to do it this way. He only actually needed one robot for the purpose of the story, the one that commits the murder, so he could have used TikTok instead of ignoring his entire backstory. If Madame Morrible had sold him to the King of Ev after using him as a murder weapon, it could have even been a cool tie-in to Ozma of Oz, but... As mentioned in videos past, because he wanted to write a story about women being oppressed by patriarchal politics, Maguire had to drop Baum's original setup of the Land of Oz, in which the 4 main countries were all ruled by witches. In his Oz, none of the witches were the official rulers, it was just that the sorceresses in the East and North were respected enough public figures to occasionally be deferred to by the Gillikins and Munchkins in...
But, like, Elphaba does become... like effectively like the chief of the Arjikas. Like, so does Nessarose. She's also like the Eminence Throp. Like, what do you mean, dude? Like, and it's only really Glinda who's it's kind of yeah. And I think the implication is supposed to be you're supposed to question if Morrible is the sort of adept or witch of like the 4th one. I think the idea in Wicked is that Dorothy is the Witch of the South because she comes from Kansas, but she's just from a different world. I think that's the implication. Am I actually drinking alcohol? I thought you can't. I can drink. I'm on ADHD medications. It's SSRIs you can't drink on. Also, I'm not gonna get crunk. I'm drinking like tequila rosa, basically. It's 15% alcohol. The cream liquor. It's basically a strawberry milkshake with a little bit of tequila in it. I'm not sitting here taking like 10 shots. I very rarely drink.
Unexpected moments of crisis, like a revolution or a barn house falling out of the sky. In keeping with the general theme that every part of Baum's book that makes it into the new story has to have a darker, edgier makeover, the Cowardly Lion's cowardice is revealed to be the result of being experimented on by unethical scientists when he was a cub. And finally, while I cannot technically say for certain
I don't know
that
about
there
that.
weren't extreme kink sex clubs in Oz in The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum, and Dorothy just happened not to run across them, I doubt it. Final thoughts.
He's talking about the Philosophy Club, which is like this weird sex cult that like they go to because like they're in mourning and they want to feel alive. But like the thing with cults is that's how they operate. They take advantage of people that are mourning or like vulnerable or like going into a new stage of their life, and then they abuse them. That's what cults do. And considering the themes of religion in Wicked, yeah, it's not surprising that Maguire comes strong against like dangerous sex cults as a Catholic. That being said, Baum is not cruel to other religions. There's another like religion that like is kind of like old-fashioned and dying out, called Lurlinism, and it's basically like the pagan religion, and a lot of older people still follow it, even though it's kind of like it's kind of a faux pas. Like Elphaba's nanny is a follower of Lurline, and there's some implications that there are some connections between like all of the major religions have like a similar origin story, because like in fantasy, like religion is a little like it's hard to be an atheist in a world where like gods can just like walk up to you and be like, "Sup, dude?" Like, Elphaba is an atheist, but not so much in that she doesn't think that magic and stuff doesn't exist. It's that she's so rebellious and such an anarchist that she won't follow any one thing. She's more effectively an agnostic that just doesn't, she thinks with a scientific lens, though she does like think that sorcery is a thing, and she does recognize that like Lurline and like Ozma and like all of the like that and the unnamed god were probably based on something real. She just doesn't believe in dogmatic faith. At the end of the book, it's revealed that what Elphaba wants more than anything is a soul, which is kind of sad, I think. But I think ultimately she gets her wish because her spirit and her soul kind of carries throughout the rest of the Oz books. Even after she's like, because her friends still value her and love her, and she becomes like a positive symbol to a lot of the people that we kind of encounter in the rest of the Oz books. But the idea that he's spinning that Elphaba is looked at unfavorably by like the people of Oz and Wicked is just a lie. Like, it's not true. Yeah, Edward Elric being an atheist after God ripped his leg off. Yeah.
I feel like if you want to sell yourself as the untold story of an existing character and or a surprising new perspective on a famous tale, you have to walk a fine line regarding providing new information and not completely contradicting the original text. Surely there has to be some chance that both the original and the new story could both have happened, or it kills the emotional impact of recontextualizing things. You're not telling us a new thing about people we thought we already knew. You're telling us a completely different story about people we've never met before. This book just doesn't walk that line. Like I've said a few times, changes were an essential part of it, but The Wonderful Wizard of Oz and Wicked are just contradictory on almost every fundamental element of the world and story. Strongly hinting about unreliable narrators and sources of information can only take you so far. Eventually you have to acknowledge that this is just a completely different thing. Dark and uncomfortable reboots of previously
You don't say.
childish things can work. It's rare and it's hard to do, but I've seen them. As intentionally warped as this was.
It's revisionist literature. Yeah, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good, Hmm. I don't know, guys. Do you think that Wicked was a good book based on the opinion of, like, this fucking guy? Versus the opinion of, like, it largely being received very positively when it came out and in the years that followed?
Fans of the Oz books could still have got a nostalgic kick out of the new take on the world.
And they did.
But for me personally, there was just a perceivable lack of interest in the source material that turned me off it as an adaptation. Perhaps, if it had been a better book, I might have been more forgiving, but as I explained at length, we'll never know. But one thing I do know is this video was brought to you by Nebula. Nebula is a...
I hated that. Kicking this man in the pants. Anyway. I'm gonna put some music on while I arrange some things. Stay tuned.
What is your opinion on Lindsay Ellis?
I like Lindsay Ellis. I haven't watched that little clip, but it's largely like inoffensive, from what I've heard from people. I may possibly be having a guest who agreed to come on to this the other day. Just making sure that they're free. Okay, let's freaking go. Hello, hello?
Hello, hello.
Can you introduce yourself to the class?
Sure thing. Hi everyone. I'm Mac. Book of Mac. I've been in the live chat, getting annoyed and mad. I'm just on the server and I have such thoughts on this video.
Now, I kind of recognize you as a person that's very passionate about transformative works and like adaptations and all of that. So that's why I really wanted to reach out to you. And I heard that you already watched this video, so I was very excited to talk to you about this. Kind of similar format as last review.
Yeah. I guess I want to just start off a little bit with like my experience with Dom. I too watched his videos. I've watched them on and off for the last couple of years, I guess. I'm subscribed to him still on YouTube because I think he can make some interesting stuff and has occasional good commentary. But I think a big thing he's running into with especially Wicked, and like I'll also say now, I'm not super experienced with The Wizard of Oz beyond the movie. I've just started reading the book. I'm really enjoying it so far. But I think something he's running into, especially for this review, is that he's never done book to book.
Yeah.
From what I can tell, he's done either just book reviews or he's done straight up transmedia adaptations.
Yes.
Which is different from what he's done here. And I think that has immediately set him up to fail because his format just does not work. And I just...
Because it's not really an adaptation.
I wrote notes.
You know, it's not supposed to be, hey, this is the Wizard of Oz again. It's like, hey, like I was inspired by this character and these ideas and this theme and I wrote a book about it. Using this imagery and cultural touchstone as like, you know, like. And I hate that he's like, clearly he doesn't care about the Wizard of Oz. It's like more than half of this man's library, more than half of this man's books are just Wizard of Oz, like transformative works. Relax a little bit.
And I did some research into like his book, into his bibliography, and like some of the things he wrote before Wicked include like a series of like essays on children's literature. He's clearly quite. I obviously haven't read it, but I assume he's quite familiar with the golden age of children's literature, and thus the entire oeuvre of the Wizard of Oz because of that, and thus is engaged with that like discourse. Like, not to be too academic about it, but I think that's a really important part of this, right? Like the book to me reads like literary fiction or like very like entry level literary, and I think that part of it has really thrown Dom off as a critic because he doesn't really engage with that a lot. He engages with more like straight genre fare. And like that's not a bad thing.
He's a pop culture boy, and that's fine, but like this is like Gregory Maguire is clearly like a literature boy. Like those are two different things. It's kind of like if somebody went to an opera expecting it to be like a Broadway musical and then was like, this is all the reason that opera is bad. It's like my girl, my boy, my dude, my dipshit in Christ. Those are two different things. Why are you expecting an opera to be a fucking Broadway musical?
Exactly. I totally agree with that. So I have a couple quick things I want to then tackle up top. The thing that initially made me mad was this phrase quite close to the top, and you got a bit upset by it too, was this idea that fan fiction requires passion to be good. First and foremost, I don't think Wicked is fanfic. I'll come back to that. But you don't need passion for fan fiction to be good. Good fan fiction is in conversation with the thing that it's based on, as with all transformative works. Be they adaptations, retellings, etc. You need to have that good conversation. Being accurate or being like having passion about something is not enough. You need to have something to say. You can't just parrot the same points that the original work made. You have to, you know, reinterpret, add your own flavor to it. And I think that's a big part of why Wicked does resonate, because it is adding a lot of its own flavor to the original Oz books.
And now, I have a question for you. This is kind of unrelated. Is your window open? I am hearing the little Twitter tweety of birds.
I'm outside. I'm technically outside. It's quite early in the morning, and I don't want to wake people up.
Fair enough.
Sorry, I didn't realize it was that noticeable.
It's not. It's only when you're talking. I'm just hearing little tweets of birds, and I'm like, what's happening? Like, are you a Disney princess? But okay, you know, go ahead. It's fine. It's fine.
I mean, that's sort of relevant to something I want to bring up a bit later. So I don't know. Maybe that'll be funny. But yeah. What else do I want to say? And then to the point of, is Wicked fanfiction? To me, no. Fanfiction by its very nature is not publishable, because fanfiction requires there to be this struggle against copyright. To quote Henry Jenkins, one of the foremost people for like fandom analysis, fanfiction is a way of the culture repairing the damage done in a system where contemporary myths are owned by corporations instead of owned by the folk.
Yeah, and like, I believe like it's considered academically, like Wicked is considered academically like revisionist literature. And a parallel novel rather than like fanfic. Paige Paige's super chat.
He like the birdie ASMR, keep it.
Yeah, she likes the birdie ASMR. Okay, keep going.
I have chat open on my phone, so it's I have access.
So if you
it's all good. It's all good.
if you see a super chat pop up, just give it a second so that we can so that you don't get interrupted by.
Gotcha.
Actually, you know what I could probably do? You keep talking, and I'm going to turn the text to speech off while you're doing that.
No
so
worries.
You keep talking.
Yep. So, like I said, fanfiction by its nature cannot really be published. There is some leeway when it comes to things that are like just hitting the public domain or have aspects of the canon in and out of it. But most of the time, for something to be fanfiction, especially in the contemporary age where we have the internet and stuff, it needs to be something that you can't publish commercially. And I don't know, like the fact that copyright extends for as long as it does has led to a lot of people like being really frustrating about the term fanfiction. I think transformative works is a far more encompassing word, because that's what I think he's trying to get at. But because of just the cultural connotation of the term fanfiction as amateurish, as bad, as sloppy writing, it really frustrates me. Because, like, fanfiction is more than that, I think. I think there's some very good fanfiction out there, very good fanfiction having good conversations with the media it's inspired by. But I don't think Wicked is fanfiction. Wicked is a retelling.
Yeah.
This is part of a bigger literary movement of fairy tale retellings, which is something that McGuire is like otherwise interested in. From what I can tell, basically all of his adult novels that aren't Wicked are fairy tale retellings of some kind, or like classical tale retellings in the case of the Nutcracker, because I think that has an author. Like a specific author rather than being transcribed, which is like a distinction in fairy tale stuff. And he has Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, Nutcracker. This puts his work in conversation with those other fairy tale retellings which do all the same shit that he was doing, right? There's a lot of this. There's a term called grimmification, which is like a thing that applies to like these fairy tale retellings that make things a little bit darker, tend to go on the darker variations of these fairy tales. And, like, that's not a bad thing. And oftentimes, it's, like, engaging with the traditions that these stories are, like, in. For example, one of my favorite fairy tales, or, like, old folk tales is Tamlin, which is a story I really love, but there are variations of it which include a lot of, like, implied sexual a solid amount of sexual assault. But it's, like, something that can come in and out of the narrative. So I don't find people engaging with that a bad thing. It's engaging with the story. And because The Wizard of Oz is, like, as the original books are supposed to be American fairy tales, I don't think it's a bad thing to look back at those and go and add that as like a re-examination. It is doing what the rest of the canon does. I shall shut up for a sec.
Yeah, no,
because I saw Boggle has a chat.
Yeah, I did mute the super chat so it won't like speak over you. Fan fiction requires an element of gratification missing from Wicked, and I will say, I don't know where Dom is coming from when he says that Gregory Maguire clearly doesn't like the original books. I think it's very obvious to me that he does. He just wants to recontextualize it. He wants to like add his own spin on it. I think he's very passionate about it. Like I'm saying this as somebody who's very passionate about DC, where like I've written things and drawn comics, and I did have like a little shitty webcomic, like a DC webcomic that I only got 15 pages into that like very heavily altered things. Like I think comic books are such a great example of how people love 100%. The source material, but when they make transformative works on it, they change it so heavily because they want to recontextualize it to be more relevant to their experiences. So
yeah, 100%. And let me look at my things. Trying to think if I have any notes that can go off that, because I was like, I need to write some of this down because I was just having thoughts.
Ooh. Hot take. Oh, I just want to read
like,
something out that Paige said. Hot take, but saying
please.
something reads like fanfic is a useless criticism from someone who has never read or written fan fiction. Yes, this is why I wanted to bring Mac on, because she's the they're the Discord, the local Discord fanfic enthusiasts, transformative works enthusiasts.
Yeah.
Okay, you go ahead.
Love to talk about it. I just yap about it. Like, okay, so I want to add some like backstory here to make this make sense for people who maybe aren't as familiar with Wicked like I am. So I did some research because I had already sort of had some engagement. There's a podcast I really like called Of Slippers and Spindles, which looks at fairy tales and adaptations and retellings of those fairy tales. And they did a whole couple months on a bunch of stuff from the golden age of children's literature, which lasted from 1865 to 1926. So a space of about 50 years at the turn of the century. So that's when you get things like Alice in Wonderland, Peter Pan, and he's, I think, a little bit before this, but Hans Christian Andersen is also sort of in this conversation as well, as like people who are writing things for like young people or writing literary fairy tales. And all of these are things that get reinterpreted darker. Alice in Wonderland especially, and I think part of that just comes from like drug culture of the 60s appropriating the use of the eating and eat this to make you bigger, like White Rabbit by Jefferson Airplane, I think is a big part of that cultural conversation of why does Alice in Wonderland get these dark reimaginings? Because it's part of the culture. And I think that's also a little bit part of The Wizard of Oz, right? You have all these rumors and all these things that happen on the set of the movie especially that lead to this really, not tarnishing necessarily, but this darker look at like this haha fun and light series.
And
when like there, yeah. Oh, please.
And I think, again, he didn't mention the queerness of the book at all. Didn't mention that like so many of the main characters are queer, and that like it's a very like queer book, period. Which is very disappointing to me. He shows up in the first book with a trans rights shirt on, and like just doesn't even talk about the queer fucking themes of the book, and it really upsets me, I think.
Totally.
I'm The Wizard of Oz. The Wizard of Oz, the book and the movie are such like a big deal in the queer community and have been for like decades. So like, I don't know. It's just very frustrating.
100%. And I think to add on to that, like the way it was always described to me, it was like there was only 2 scenes of like that are like about like Elphaba maybe being intersex, right? But like throughout the book, like I'm only early on, like in the Glinda and Box sections, and like it's constantly referenced that like she doesn't really feel wholly like a girl all the time, and I find that so interesting, and like that's like an inherent like part of her, and I don't know, I appreciate that a lot as someone who went to an all-girls school and felt that way when I was a bit younger, right? Like I think ignoring that, especially knowing what's going to be coming for it, because I don't know if he has any experience with the musical or the movie beyond like maybe hearing Defying Gravity and For Good, because for my salt, that was my initial exposure to Wicked as a thing, was like seeing ads for the touring show, which in Australia had one of our biggest TV personalities of the time, historically, as the Wizard, which, especially knowing what actually happens in the musical, weird casting.
I think it is mentioned several times. It's touched on as one of the rumors about her being born a hermaphrodite or being born male. And also, and sorry to use that term, I know it's considered a slur. I could say it. I'm intersex. Also, that's literally what they say. It's mentioned when she's born, and also when she gets intimate with Fiyero later, like it's like she's very uncomfortable with him seeing her genitals. He glimpses them when they're being intimate at one point, and like thinks he sees a scar or something there, and she hides herself. So like it's brought up multiple times. It's a heavy implication, and that was certainly my reading of it, even when I read it the first time, that like, oh, I like she was clearly like intersex and then like had an operation done on her as a baby or something. Like something clearly happened. Like sometimes
there's implications there that are really important.
Yeah. And again, it just kind of like is another part of her otherness. Like despite being born into a wealthy family, she's othered. She gets to, like most queer weird children, she gets to college and she meets people that love her and cherish her, and like everybody's like, oh, that Elphaba, she's weird, but she's harmless, she's smart, she's passionate, she dresses weird and she's awkward, but we love her, we keep her around. She is definitely kind of, people kind of like don't like her in her first year, but by her second year, again, she has like this huge group of friends that she hangs out with like all the time. So
yeah, 100%. And like it's, what was I gonna get at? I think like ignoring that, especially knowing what's coming up with these coming reviews, him just ignoring all of this is really interesting. And maybe like, you know, there's a level of like, okay, maybe he has like sort of consumed it all and was writing the scripts as he went, and maybe went back and edited, and that's why some of the things seem out of place. And that's something I could definitely see happening. But I think the fact that he just straight up like barely talks about Nessa Rose, even though I know she's quite important in the musical. Right?
Well,
like,
in the book,
like she's
too.
like a fairly significant.
Yeah.
In the book too. I haven't really gotten to her parts in the book yet, to be fair. But like my understanding is that in the musical she's quite significant, and like the fact that he hasn't talked about her at all, it really, besides a couple odd mentions, is I think quite telling. At least in my opinion.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
If you don't mind me saying, it's interesting because Nessa Rose in the musical is treated as like, oh, she's so disabled and tragically beautiful, and like she's so sweet and good and kind. Dude, Nessa Rose in the fucking book is a bitch. Like she's a horrible person. She thinks she's so pious, and she's so like, she's so self-centered, and she thinks that she's so much better than everyone else. She's horrible. She's a horrible girl. And I think that's interesting that like they like basically like declaw her in the musical, and like instead of making her she's wobbly in the books, and she has no arms, so she has a hard time moving around, and again, she has no arms. But in the musical they just make her wheelchair bound, and like cool to see like somebody in a wheelchair, but like it also is just like not what's going on. I don't think like amputees and like wheelchair users are a good one-to-one. I don't think that's a good adaptation. I understand it's probably difficult to find an actress that's, you know, that can do the things that you need Nessa Rose to do, that doesn't have arms, but like I think like that's an excellent chance for a disabled actress to shine in the role of Nessa Rose. And I wish she had been given as much personality in the musical as she was in the books.
Yeah, 100%. And like I think there's like, and like at the same time I'm like, it's one of those things where it's like the practicalities of adaptational change, that stuff happens. And I find that this is where I sort of get into a broader conversation about Dom's whole oeuvre of content, as much as I hate that word. His look at adaptation makes sense when you start out, right? Like he's looking at these like book to screen adaptations, often like these quite malign screen adaptations that tend not to be like very good or accurate, and that's all well and good. When you get, there's a certain point where you have to get to in doing that, where you have to acknowledge like the practicalities of it, right? Like you can only do so much. You do not have a budget for a book. You can put whatever the hell you want on a page, movies have budgets. Movies have people that are making them. And it's something that really does bother me about how he approaches this stuff. And like, especially when it comes to the stage, I think there's like an even stronger thing because like, you know, the reason Wicked is softened for the stage is because it's got to sell to a Broadway audience because it was always going to be a Broadway show. It was never going to be really like that kind of off-Broadway weird thing. Like, I think Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812 is a good counterexample because it's also a spectacle, also an adaptation of a fairly well-known book, but is fundamentally different in that it's like, you know, it was made for off-Broadway, and Dave Malloy, the composer and writer, is a weird little freak, and I love him to bits. He doesn't make stuff for commercial things. He makes it because he's making art, which I really appreciate in the musical theater space.
Yeah, I mean, like, I've said this for quite a bit, that, like, Wicked, again, sorry to be, like, a glazer for opera, but I think Wicked would have been a better opera than it was a musical.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. Like, opera has, you know, like, the melodrama of opera matches sort of the vibe I'm getting from the book. Like, it's sort of like almost dark academia in that middle section, and I think that would work really well in opera.
Yeah.
I think there's like a matching of vibes.
I think also...
And also, it fits for, like, the setting, too, because it's, like, that early, like, late Victorian Edwardian period where, like, that's, like, the vibe.
I also think, also, sorry, Boy Done, I have supplanted your crew with a piece of fan art. Sorry. Anyway, I was gonna say that, like, you look at something like Sweeney Todd, though, and, like, that managed to be dark on Broadway. It was kind of played up as a comedy, but, like, I don't know. I feel like...
Yeah. That's Sondheim, though, and I think Sondheim... Yeah. And Sondheim was never successful on Broadway as well, too, right?
True, 'cause that was, like, that
for
was
the most part,
End,
did not do well. I think it got onto Broadway, and I think it might be one of the few things that did well for Sondheim on Broadway, but I don't think even Into the Woods did, like, that well, grand scheme of things.
I prefer Sondheim to Schwartz, personally.
Oh, yeah.
So I know that's, like, a big...
very, like...
Yeah.
That makes...
Wow,
no, I think that's
unpopular
fair.
opinion, much. JK. Fork Founded Kitchen, queer man prefers Sondheim to fucking Schwartz. Wow. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that's it. But yeah, but yeah, and you know, and this concept of, like, talking about, like, the path of adaptation. This is where I sort of get into my rant about how fairy tale adaptations work, because I think, you know, I'm positing that Wicked is operating in the realm of fairy tale adaptation and fairy tale retelling. All fairy tale retellings have to contend with one very frustrating fact in this day and age: the fact that Disney exists. You cannot tell a retelling of Cinderella, of Sleeping Beauty. You can get away with a bit more of Snow White, especially. Snow White has owes so much to Disney for how it is retold. So even literary adaptations have to have, like, some deference to Disney unless they are doing a specific cultural variation. Say they're doing Vasalisa if they're doing a Cinderella, or they're doing the Chinese version, which I forget the specific name of. But, like, you know, like, what color do you...
I apologize. Sorry. I think there is. I will say that I'm not trying to interrupt Mac, and I don't think Mac is trying to speak over me. Mac, if you couldn't tell, is Australian. So there is some lag. So we're trying, but I think there's no way to escape that we're going to talk over each other a little bit. I went to a opera a few months ago called Cinderella, and it's a direct adaptation of the Cinderella, or original French Cinderella book, and it was made before the Disney adaptation. However, what I think is really interesting, and I think I want to kind of, like, use as an example of what I think happened with Dom's review, is that there was like whenever like something magical happened, they did that little jingle, a wish, a dream is a wish your heart makes. And I'm not gonna play it on stream, but it's on like all the da 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 da. It's that little jingle. And whenever you see a picture of the Disney castle in like Disney movies, and you hear that da 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 da, that's the Cinderella jingle. That's a dream is a wish your heart makes. From Cinderella. And like, even though this was an adaptation based on an opera, like it was an opera that was made before the Disney movie existed, they still sprinkled in Disney Cinderella. And I think that Dom does this here, where he is projecting the musical Glinda, who is very bubbly, wears a lot of pink and like baby blue, and like is very like, girly and feminine and bubbly. He is projecting that onto a character that like was not like that in the books. Like, I don't know, like I feel like he must have already either watched the musical or the movie, or like is just thinking of the Glinda from like promotional materials, because she's just not like that in the books. Again, like the first time that we meet Glinda in the books, she's wearing green and black and like wants to be seen as this beautiful academic woman who is like, oh, she must be so smart and she's so pretty, she's so cultured, she knows so much about architecture. That's what Glinda wants to be seen as. She doesn't want to be seen as this tee-hee popular girl. She wants to be seen as sophisticated. That's I think that like the fact that's a big part of like what bothers me about musical Glinda, is because we go from this woman who desperately wants to be seen as sophisticated and cultured to like popular. Like, she's very much like based on fucking Regina George, like but anyway, you go ahead. I believe I interrupted you, but like I thought that was relevant.
No, I think I appreciate that. I think Cinderella is actually a really good example, because Cinderella has such like is going to be the fairy tale around for the longest because of like the anxieties and cultural stuff that the story represents. What color do you associate with Cinderella, Krim?
I mean, like silver and I guess light blue, I suppose.
Yeah, and that is because of the Disney movie. You can't and that's something that's pretty consistent across a lot of different adaptations. And part of that is the shoe, but that's also because it's the French version. Like, they chose to do the French version rather than the Grimm version, where they wear gold shoes.
Interesting. Yeah, because isn't her dress in the Grimm? It's like a golden dress, right?
I think so, and I think that's one of those things that also comes up from parts of like donkey skin adaptations, which is a whole other can of worms.
Yeah,
but like that's because fairy tales are fluid, and like there's something to be said about like the way that you sort of trap a story when you write down something that's part of the oral tradition. And there's something to be said about how that works with fairy tales. I think that's really interesting. But like and like we have even older examples, like there's a Greek I'm not sure if it's ancient Greek, but there's a Greek version that's set in Egypt, where like there's a slipper dropped by a bird, and the Cinderella equivalent is a courtesan, and the pharaoh falls in love with her. It's wild. It's called Rhodopis, if I remember correctly. And like all these these are like consistent cultural elements that come through from these stories, but the version we see is very much the version that Disney chose to adapt. And I think you see this with, I think The Little Mermaid's a huge culprit of this, because it's so different from the fairy tale, but it was always going to be, because you can't really tell children about like because it's a tragedy, and also deeply, deeply religious, which is a bit harder to talk about.
Yes, absolutely. Also, while we're talking, I'm going to be doodling. So just a heads up. I don't know how much longer you plan on being here, but I do want to give them some visual stuff to look at.
No, that's all good. I'm trying to think what else did I want to mention. Because I've covered a lot of it. There was also one thing about I found in my bookshelf, because I remembered I had this book on that was full of like little essays on children's literature, and I was like, oh, maybe it's got a collection of a lot of works because I couldn't remember, and maybe it's got something from Maguire. It didn't. It's a book written by a lady called Alison Lurie called Boys and Girls Forever, and it has a chapter on Oz. And it had this lovely little paragraph at the end that made me really think. And I've sort of truncated it because I didn't want to fully transcribe it. It's like, yes, you can escape, and this is about like Oz and like how, because of the influence Baum had from his deeply feminist mother-in-law, how that influenced the work and how he portrayed women in the book and why it's quite political. Dom. But Alison writes, yes, you can escape from your dreary domestic life, never do housework or homework, and maybe most important of all, never grow up. And I found that line really interesting because a lot of these golden age of literature books, especially when they're about girls, it's often, like, at least in the modern day, interpreted as, to an extent, about growing up. It's a coming-of-age story. Like, Wendy is the character that develops in Peter Pan. Alice, less development, but that's something that's often tackled in adaptation. It is often a growing thing for her. In the later Oz books, my understanding is that Dorothy stays about the same age. Like, she stays quite young throughout, and that's part of the appeal.
Yes. Also, like, I don't think it's spoken of about enough, but like, Baum didn't. Baum got kind of sick of the Oz books, and I'm surprised that
that makes sense.
I'm surprised that wasn't fucking talked about in this. That, like, at the end, Baum was like, God, like, that's what they want, and I'm getting paid by the letter, but like, he didn't really want to.
I have a ton.
I think, like, towards the end, he was just doing it because, starving artist, you need to get paid.
He wrote 14 books in 20 years.
Yeah, that's nuts.
And two of those, and at least one of those books was published posthumously. So technically, 14 Oz books in 18 years, because he died in 1918.
Yes.
Which I think is actually really relevant to the legacy, because, like, there's also, like, a bunch of copyright stuff with the books for his kids trying to write in the universe, but not technically being allowed to. Really interesting stuff. Something I don't think copyright should last as long as it does.
Agreed.
But who's to say?
And I think, like, the moral, sort of, like, hand-wringing that Dom does about adaptations, like, it's very frustrating to see.
Yeah. And it's something that I think makes sense when you're, like, entering the world of adaptation. Like, oh, this thing I love was changed by someone else. I can't, this cannot be abided. And sometimes I think that is warranted. But at the same time, like, if we don't have people who look at works and change things significantly, we don't get things like the Starship Troopers movie, which I think is better for being different. We don't get, I'm trying to think of other really radically different things, but, like, I think Starship Troopers is a really good example because it's also, like, older literature from, like, the 50s that, like, you have to reinterpret because of how military fiction works.
Yes.
But to go back a little bit to my point on not growing up, I think that's something that Wicked plays with. Like, it's about a woman reaching adulthood and dealing with adult problems. It is directly having this is the part of the conversation that the Wicked years seems to be having with the original Oz series. And I think that's a really, like, not acknowledging that. And maybe because he's just doing a one book / movie to a book look at it, you don't have time to cover all that necessarily, but I think you kind of have to when you're looking at these pretty, like, intense adaptations, grand scheme of things. Mm-hmm. Like, if maybe there's a point actually to adding all the politics beyond, like, looking at times and places. and American imperialism. Maybe there's a reason for this. Why is this happening? And I don't know, like, especially when you have such a golden glowing adaptation like The Wizard of Oz there in your adaptation history that you're also pulling from, like, that exists. That's never going away. The books exist, they're never going away. Why get so upset about something being so different? Like,
I mean, like, I guess
that's sort of where I hit my wall a little bit.
I guess that could be said for me getting as upset as I am about the adaptations of Wicked, because, like, I'm blowing a gasket about this, but also, like, again, I was right in my first Wicked video. If you haven't watched that, it's on my channel. It's one of my latest videos. I released it a couple weeks ago. Please watch it if you haven't already, after the stream, of course. But, like, because I knew, well, it's a big Hollywood adaptation. Like, it's one thing for there to be, like, a transformative work that's like, oh yeah, I'm playing with this world. It's another thing for a Hollywood adaptation to take over as much as the Universal one does. And I wouldn't feel so strongly, I think, if I knew that, like, the original was going to be relatively unscathed. But not only is it very much scathed, but people are, like, projecting, like, musical only things, like Glinda's personality and her aesthetic, like, they're projecting that onto a character where, like, that's not the case at all. So
no, I totally get that. And I guess thinking on it, I suppose there's a level of difference between, like, adapting something that is, or adapting or playing with something that has public domain elements, and this, like, legal, like, there's a legal process that goes into adapting something that's not in the public domain, right? There's this process of, like, you have to get some kind of agreement from the original author, or permission from them or their publisher if they're posthumous.
Yes.
You can't, and especially with the profit motive there as well, right? This is maybe capitalism was the enemy all along part, right? And I think that's maybe a big part of this conversation, like, adaptation is often fueled by money. It's why in the YA boom, things were getting movie deals before they were even published, because YA printed money.
For a little while, anyway.
For a little while. But yeah, I think that's maybe, and I'm not sure if he's really realized that, like, because I think that's part of the issue. And, like, obviously you can have a story that you feel really strongly about, that you want to fight for, but ultimately especially because he's not looking, for the most part, I can't think of anything that he's looked at that is, like, someone's, like, pride and joy indie project that they got special permission from the original author to make, off the top of my head. I'm sure it's something like that exists, and maybe he's done it, but, like, it's, yeah, I think it's an interesting thing to think about, adding that context.
Yes. I don't know. I think there's something to be said also between, like, using something, like, as a tool to tell a story, which I think is what was going on with Gregory Maguire's whole thing, versus wanting to do a direct adaptation, which I think is like musical and, like, because, like, musical and how should I say, like, a movie
Screen adaptation?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, sorry. Because I think that, like, it's like, oh, well, Wicked's a good book, and I want to, like, put that on the screen, whereas Mike Maguire was like, okay, so, like, I want to tell a story about the nature of evil, and I want to use The Wizard of Oz, one of the most famous American, like, fairy tale, to do it. Like, the motivations are different, and I think that can't be, think that can't be, like, like, it can't be understated. Or if it can't be overstated, I should say.
Yeah. I totally get that. Yeah. And I'm trying to think of like other interesting examples that go along with that, because I'm sure there's some that exist. Because like
somebody brought up
Ella Enchanted, maybe.
Yes, that's a excellent. Ella Enchanted and Wicked were written around the same time, actually, and they're doing something very similar.
Out of the same literary movement.
Yeah, exactly. Has Dom covered Ella Enchanted before?
He did. Oh god, he covered that like early on. I remember it. And I think one of the things I remember very clearly, and it has been a while since I watched the video, so forgive me if I'm getting this wrong. He didn't realize it was a Cinderella retelling when he was reading the book up until like just before everything happened, which is wild to me.
What does he say about it?
Fascinating. Like he says he realizes it like when it starts like kicking off properly, but I think he must have just assumed it was like a generic fantasy story.
What did he think she was named
Ella like
for?
Up top? And like admittedly this was years ago.
It wasn't that long ago. It was
Girl name.
It was 7 years ago, so it's not that long ago.
I think that's around when he started, and I think that one got re-uploaded at least once. Because he was on Channel Awesome for a while, which I think is something worth mentioning as well. He joined Channel Awesome just as Change the Channel came out, and then he, managed to slip away quite easily.
Yeah.
Reputation largely untainted.
Yeah, I don't know if he was involved with any of that, but interesting that I would say that
he's fine. He's like
he's fine in that way. I did not appreciate the fucking reference to Glinda's pussy, but like it's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
What is it? I kind of want to make Miss cringe to say again, like remember when it was like people just didn't like how it sounded and when you just didn't say it? I want that to come back. Actually, I think that would be good.
I think it's like popular to be like kind of like yummy, like sweaty, moist milfs. Like I think that's like the new thing to do. So like like yay, girl stink. Like I think that's the thing now. And I
we exist in a horror or in a frustrating society.
Yeah, like it's okay to like sexually objectify women if you make them seem like kind of gross and slimy when you're doing it. That's perfectly fine. I fucking hate everything actually. Are you okay?
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to add. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just double checking my stuff. Reason
Don't go into the light.
The movie's not good.
Sorry, you cut off a lot there.
Sorry. One sec. We aim that there. Alright. But yeah, what was I getting at? But yeah, like The Wiz exists and existed like 20 years before the Wicked book existed.
Mm-hmm.
And the year that Maguire published his first, acting like Wicked is this like unique gem of dark interpretations of the Wizard of Oz is really fascinating. And I'm not saying like I don't think that The Wiz is necessarily that. The Return to Oz movie happened, which is also quite dark. People often comment about the fact that it is a really scary movie when you watch it after watching The Wizard of Oz, which like has a couple moments that are maybe a bit beloved now for how weird and spooky it is as a kid's film. The pieces of media that predate Wicked and give extra context to, hey, maybe there's a reason why there's some upsetting things in this series.
I don't know. It was this review in general. I just find it was very kind of upsetting and like dishonest and like I didn't like this review. I like he already pissed me off with the first one, but like this was even worse. It's just so No, I'm not gonna get over it.
Let me see. I think that was about it. Imagine cannons. I made a timeline for myself, like just to see like when everything came out, and that's why I had all that, because I wanted to actually check when all the copyrights happened, which is why I mentioned it in chat a bit earlier. And funnily enough, Stephen King just fully on references like the movie version of The Wizard of Oz in 1997 in one of the Dark Tower books, and he's fine. Like referencing even the ruby shoes is fine in a book. it's fine.
Yeah, it's when it's a book, there are some like
Like, obviously,
exceptions, and like I think that for the
yeah.
most part, MGM has a history of being pretty tolerant about references to, you know, their adaptation of The Wizard of Oz. As far as I
Mm.
understand, I could be wrong, but like that's the impression that I get. So yeah. And again, one of my favorite details from Wicked is the implication that the song that Elphaba sings in the bar is Somewhere Over the Rainbow, which is really interesting to think about her being the one to breathe that into the world, because it says that she made it up on the spot. And it's like, oh, you know, if I could, maybe I could find the direct passage, but it's very much like, oh, it's a land, like it's surprising because she's not, you know, she's an atheist, but like, you know, it's a story about like a
Mm.
far off land where none of the troubles that exist in their world, you know, plague anyone, and like it makes the whole bar kind of tear up and like get very emotional, which, you know, I don't know, I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, one thing that I think Dom, some constructive criticism for you. Something that I'd love you to like maybe reference in your videos if you ever end up listening to this. Look into and research using the term not intersection, intertextuality.
Mm-hmm.
An intertext is a text that references something else. It's an academic term, but it is really useful in these situations. It is more than a reference. It is when something is sort of having that commentary on something else in another work. It comes up a lot in adaptation. I think it is such a useful term, so you don't have to like frame it like, you know, a pop culture reference or whatever. It is it's a distinct part of the adaptation process because of those conversations that you're having, especially when you are crossing mediums, because there's certain things you can't do. So sometimes a reference is all you know, that small bit of intertextuality or whatever is all you get.
Yes. Like,
Please
like
educate your audience. It'll be great.
yeah, like, because it's never said outright that, oh yeah, she's singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, but it's the same thing with like, oh, the slippers are the color of like embers and blood, but also yellow diamonds and crystal lakes. Like, yeah, that's like some intertextuary like references, because like he can't say that that's what those are because, you know, copyright, but like that's what those are.
And I think it's a really clever way of getting around it. It's a really smart reinterpretation.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that's about everything. So I might bounce because it is.
Yes.
I sort of watched the sun come up as I was talking.
I am so
Love to live in
sorry.
Australia and in the real land of Oz. No, it's fine. My sleep's been kind of messed up, so this is helping me reset. It's fine.
I really appreciate you coming on and like taking some time out of your busy day to talk to me about this, and like, you know,
It's no worries.
missing some sleep. I'm so sorry.
Nah, you're fine. Genuinely, it's fine. But yeah, if you haven't already, people who are in the chat, like Crim's video now. Make sure you subscribe to Crim. Fund Crim on Patreon. Give him your money.
Yes, I like being able to eat.
I'm spruiking. The things I'm spruiking is you. That's what I've decided.
I appreciate it, Mac.
And if you join the Discord, and if you join the Patreon, you can join the Discord, and then I'm happy enough to chat about this stuff any and all the time. Basically, it's sort of like a. I guess special interest is maybe the best way to phrase it, but I don't know. I have a strong academic interest in Fanish culture and how it's expressed, and it really bothers me when people just get things wrong not necessarily on purpose, but similarly because they don't do research and come from a different aspect of Fanish culture,
Yeah.
which is fine. I just would like to educate people. So yeah, it's been lovely chatting.
Yes, it's been lovely chatting with you, Mac. Thank you so much for coming on the channel, and I'll see you later.
Have a good one, everyone.
Bye. All right. Also, while we've been talking, I probably could do a little bit more research to get like her dress a little bit more accurate to the time it was intended. But here's my drawing of book accurate Glinda. I was googling and I was trying to find one, but like this is supposed to be intended as Glinda in Shiz. But thank you. Now then, were there any super chats I had to read? No, we're good. We're all caught up. All right. With that, I think we are going to call it a day. Let me just double check with I could keep you entertained. I'm glad you like my Glinda. It's a little bit anime, but it's fine. Um just all right. All right. Might have to get she just kind of have a peach character. I think it's like the poofy sleeves and the gem on the front and her being blonde. I might refine the outfit. I think it's like I'll show you like the kind of dress that I picture Glinda to be wearing. Let me bring up my first I'm gonna hide this. And then I'm gonna shrink that and I'm gonna put you back over here. Let's see. Firefox. Perhaps something like this would be a bit more accurate. I think that's a little bit too fancy for going to school. Maybe something like this. Oh. Or something like that. And let's look at because it's not a 1-to-1, right? I think it cannot be understated. It's not a 1-to-1. Yeah, maybe something like this is what Glinda would be wearing the first time we see her. Like it's very much like there's a moment where like I think Shen Shen or Fianny is like seen with her ankles showing and it's like, oh, it's so scandalous, right? Yeah, but perhaps things like this. Very sophisticated, very elegant. I could definitely see Glinda wearing something like this in green. Like the silk taffia thing. Yes, 100%. I could see that. Something like this olive green calico dress. This is a little bit too fancy and perhaps AI, I can't tell. But like this is the kind of thing that Glinda would be wearing. Whereas Elphaba wears Edwardian frock. Modest. Elphaba wears like a lot of like dark reds and purples when going to shiz. Perhaps something like this without the gloves, and more shapeless, less tailored. But if I were to like make like an accurate version of Glinda and Elphaba, it would definitely be like this would probably be something like what Elphaba would be wearing, I think. Something like this. And I think, where did it go? There was one that I really liked, this one. I think I'd put Glinda in something like this, but like greener. And and she even has flowery hats, and like the hat scene is really, really interesting with Elphaba, because like it's one of the first times they meet, and Glinda is convinced that she's gonna put on this flowery hat onto Elphaba and she's gonna look hideous. But she puts it on her and she's basically like, oh no, she's hot, I hate her, get out of my school. It's very much that sort of like gay like awakening. It's like, oh fuck, I think I like girls. It's very funny in my opinion. Yeah, I'm just going by what the books say. It's very much like this is the color that Elphaba wears, like all the time. Um, but yes, you might see some art surface. Um, my plan for the book that's the movie that's the review that is scheduled for Friday, but I'm gonna be honest, that one might also be late. Wow, a Crim video that's late. In other news, water is wet. But I think my plan is to do some visuals of my own. So I think I'm going to draw the characters that appear. Fiero, like Glinda, Nessarose, Elphaba, like probably like her parents and everything. It's gonna be a lot of work, I think. So yeah, it might not come out until a little bit into March. Sorry. But yes. Yeah, I think I will keep these up as references, because I'm gonna start working more into it, because I finished the book recently. And I'm going to, I think I'm gonna start, grinding out some drawings, starting tomorrow. Now let me check on my friend. Okay. Alright, my friend is not ready. But anyway, I think what I'm going to do is that I am going to make a community post when Raccoon streams, because she's not ready. But Raccoon talked to me last week about Dominic's wicked video from last week. So she's been on the channel before. I will put that in a community post when she's gone live. Make sure you like and subscribe if you would like to support me. Please do so. And shout out to my Patreons, my Demon Lord level Patreons, Paige and Easy Walker. And of course you will see some credits here in a moment. And I will see you guys all next time. I will be hopefully back on the Minecraft Monday thing tomorrow. So I'll see you guys then. Have a good week. Bye-bye.